Okay, so we've been doing this. I do. Okay, so we've been learning quadratic equations, and sometimes they look like this. Okay, so this would be called general. This is factored form. Okay, so when we have our x-intercepts, it's because we factored it, right? And the vertex form or the standard form. So we've actually been doing this, you just don't really know all the components yet. And A is our slope, always our slope. So what do we know? If A is positive, it will open up. If A is negative, it will open down. If A is bigger than 1, it will be a little bit skinnier. If A is less than 1, it'll be wider, right? We know all those things about A. Okay, make an equation for quadratic with a vertex and a slope. So if I've been given vertex and slope, which form should I pick? I'm going to pick vertex form. Okay, so that's the form I'm going to pick. And I'm going to fill in my vertex into these spots for the H and the K. And the slope is going to be the A. Okay, so I'm going to go y equals 2 bracket. The x stays, the squared stays. Okay, so x and y always remain open. Okay, do you notice that this says to subtract h? So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to, if I see a 1 here, I'm going to subtract 1. And then this is a plus k. So when I add a negative 3, it subtracts 3. So when you see a negative h, that means to do the opposite of what you see. So if I see a 1, this is going to have a subtract 1. If I see a plus k, it means the same, so I write down whatever I see. Okay, do you notice that this would be something you could type into your calculator, right? As soon as you see a vertex and a slope. Okay, make an equation if I gave you a vertex and a point. Okay, so vertex, that's good. That gives me h and k. Ooh, I'm missing the slope. I don't know what the slope is. Okay, so I'm going to use the point to replace my x and my y. Okay, ready? I'm going to replace x and y. There's my x and there's my y. I replaced it with 1. Okay, I'm going to replace the h with the 3, but remember that's opposite. So minus 3. I'm going to replace the k with the 5, and then I'm going to figure out a. Okay, so this is going to be you figuring out some algebra, and you're going to have to do BEDMAS stuff here. What is negative 2 squared? That should be positive 4. Are you okay understanding I'm going to have to subtract 5 here? And then divide by 4. Okay, so I have my vertex and my slope. So I'm going to write my final equation now. So remember, when you do a final equation, you always have to leave x and your y open, because that's what your calculator is doing, right? When we type into our calculator, we always have a y equals and then a bunch of stuff with x. Okay, so y equals negative 1, x subtract 3 squared plus 5. So do you see how I'm going to run this equation through? It's the slope and the vertex are in, and the x and the y are left open in the final. Okay? We had to do some xy stuff just to understand what the slope was, though. Okay, this is the same idea. So make an equation with the vertex. So I already have the h and the k. And a y-intercept. So the language might trick you here. A y-intercept really is a coordinate of a point. Do you know what the actual coordinate would be? If the y-intercept is 5, the whole point is 0, 5? Does that make sense as a coordinate? So that would be an x and a y, which means I'm missing my slope again. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing I did last question. I started with this vertex form. Okay, I'm going to plug y. That's going to be my 5. A, I don't know. X, I'm going to replace x with 0. Subtract h, so subtract 1, plus 8. Okay, so my algebra here. So this would come to be negative 1 squared, which is positive 1. Right? Negative 1 squared is actually positive 1. Now I'm going to have to subtract 8. So my slope is negative 3. So now you need to rewrite the equation at the very end with the vertex and the slope in there, x and the y, remain open. So I like to just start like this so I know my x and my y are open. And then I plug everything in. So -3 is the slope, -1 and a +8. Opposite and the same. Opposite, same. Okay, so the next one talks about x-intercepts. So I'm going to now go to this form, the factored form, because when we factor, that gets us x-intercepts. Okay, you ready? I'm going to first plug in my factors. Okay, so if I have an x-intercept of 2, I would have had a factor of x minus 2, right? Because then that gives me, before we used to just get factors and then x-intercepts. Here, if I have an x-intercept of -6, the factor would have said x plus 6. Okay, now this is a point, and it's the actual point of it is 0, -24. So that makes this an x and this is a y. So I'm going to use that, plug it in, and I'm going to figure out the slope again. So y, I'm going to replace it. X, I'm going to replace with 0. Okay, ready? So this would be -2, and this would be +6. So that's a -12. So I'm going to divide by -12. So that means A is going to be 2. Okay, so this one you're going to rewrite the very ending in the form you want, but you have to leave the x and the y open at the end. So this is the form, but now I can plug in A. So y equals 2. So this one has the factors in it with the slope, but leaving x and y open. Okay, let's see where we go here. Make an equation for a quadratic with an x-intercept of 5 and a point 3, -4. You know what, I'm going to skip that question because I'm not even sure if I would have enough info to even go any further. Okay, I'm just going to skip that one because I feel like there's not enough info on that. Okay, let's see this one then. A quadratic has x-intercepts of 10 and 2, and a slope of -1. Okay, so I'm going to look at this in my formula sheet. Okay, I have those beside me. Okay, ready? The formula would be y equals slope of -1. If I have an x-intercept at 10, then this is x minus 10. And a x-intercept of 2, so x minus 2. Okay, so that would be in factored form. Now it says figure out the location of the vertex and state the equation in vertex form. Okay, so here's what I'm going to show you. Here's what I know. I know I have an intercept at 2. And at 10. And I know that this parabola opens down because the slope is -1. This is what I want to know. Okay, there's an understanding of what the x value is there. Does anybody know what x value this is going to line up to? Looking at it, what do we know about parabolas? These points here should be symmetric with each other. Do you remember that? So where is the symmetry happening? Can you get me an x value of the exact spot it would go through then? Can you see the symmetry? What's in between a 2 and a 10? What's halfway between them? Did you think about 6? Does that make sense? Okay, so my vertex is 6 comma something. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 6 for x and plug it into that. Okay, so y equals -1, 6 minus 10, 6 minus 2. -4 is that bracket. And +4 is that bracket. So this is going to make +16. Okay, so we figured out those two things, those big ideas. So could you put that into the other form? Do you remember the other form? This is the one we were working with before. Vertex form. So remember, leave y alone, leave x alone when you write your final answer. Plug in -1 for slope, -6, and +16. So that one's always opposite, and that one's always the same.